Welcome back to the Believe Fantasy Football Show. Michael Fabiano and Lindsay Rhodes with you to discuss the fantasy fallout of all of the moves that happened last week. It feels like things have really slowed down now, and the majority of the fantasy assets that we're going to move for fantasy, purposes, or that we're going to move in free agency and have an impact on fantasy. I feel like most of those moves have already happened. Do you agree, Fabs? Is there anyone that you're waiting for, like the ball to drop on?
I mean, not really. The last guy was probably Alexander Madison, and we'll talk about him going to the Raiders, only just because that was maybe one of the guys the Cowboys might try and sign. And by the way, if you notice, I took out that stupid Giants helmet from the background, and I got two Pokes helmets, one to my right, one to my left. It looks much more glorious in my background right now.
You need more variety.
Covering a Denver Broncos helmet. Anyways, not really. Honestly, I mean, most of the big names are where they're going to be, and for the most part, the moves were fantasy friendly. For the most part.
For the most part, you think so?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah. I mean, and I've written stuff over at Sports Illustrated that you go and check. It was kind of hard for me to find a lot of losers from free agency, whether or not they actually changed teams or they stayed with their own team. So I think it was a good free agent period from a fantasy perspective. Not all the moves were home runs and A+, but I think for the most part, we've added some depth at some positions. And I think the one move that surprised me, and I know you're going to agree with me on this, is I can't believe that Justin Fields got traded for a conditional fourth. That's probably going to be a sixth. I still don't get it. People on X are making fun of me. You said he was worth a one.
That's it.
I don't know. I don't know what happened. And I get it. He's not the greatest passer in the world, but did you see some of the quarterbacks who were playing football last year in the NFL? Was not good. So yeah. I think the fact that the Vikings were not going to be a team that the Bears would trade with because it's an in-division team probably hurt. But I will say this. The Steelers are now going to be spelled Stealears. And I don't care what you say about Russell Wilson, and I don't care what you say about Justin Fields. They're paying friggin' Russell nothing. And they got Fields for what might be a sixth. I'm sorry. I don't care. That's well worth taking a shot on this kid. Well worth taking a shot.
Like, when you say they got him for a ham sandwich, it's not even like a gourmet ham sandwich.
No, it's a lousy
like
one.
They went to Subway or something like that. Like,
right.
This is like...
Yeah, it's the gross mealy ham that has different colors in it. Like when you look at it, like it's been sitting someplace too long.
They're like, this is a few days old and it has some mayo that might be a little sketch.
But we'll give
like,
it to you for Justin Fields. Okay.
You sure? Oh, okay, fine. I'll take that off your hands.
When that happened, I was at the circus in Connecticut. I was at Ringling Brothers and Barnum and Bailey Circus. And folks, for people my age, the circus ain't the same as it used to be when you were a kid. There's no clowns. There are people who play clowns, but there are no clowns because kids are scared of clowns. And there's
clowns
no
are weird. That's a good development.
I know, and there's no animals either, which I kind of like because I am a big-time animal lover. No, they're none.
Okay, but
because animals are abused in order for them to learn how to do these things. And so they don't have them anymore. But it was fun. It was still a lot of fun.
Huh? What do they have?
People, it was almost like Circus Olay for kids. Like they had the BMX bikes were fun. They were doing that. They're doing,
jump on a trampoline and
right. Yeah. Like all that kind of stuff. And then, they have there's a ring and there's a ring and the guys are going around and the thing so it was fun. And the kids that, were there,
the ring and the ring,
we had a lot of fun. But I did a video for TikTok and Instagram, from the, it was a Bridgeport Arena. From the circus. Yeah.
Okay. I was at a kids baseball game and I was doing Game Changer. Parents out there will know what I'm talking about. So I was scoring the game. And I literally stood up and I went, "What?" Sorry, that was loud. That will not be properly modulated. Everyone in their car's like, "What just happened? Why is she screaming at me?"
Did you just say proper modulation?
Yeah, it won't be properly modulated.
Oh my God! That's
so
a Howard
louder.
Stern thing. That's what his dad would always say. He plays that clip on the show all the time. All right, go ahead. Sorry, Proper modulation. Go ahead.
Okay, back to me.
Yeah.
So I start freaking out. I'm announcing to everyone. I'm like doing I'm like, okay, broadcasting this information. I stood up in the stands and I go, Justin Fields was traded to the Steelers for a 6th round pick. And I'm freaking out. One of the dads is like, this must be collusion. And I'm like, it's not collusion, but it is a problem. Like, they're wrong. So anyway, we have this. I took my phone. I walked over to a different dad and I was like, you got to do Game Changer. I can't focus. Like, you now have this job because I need to be on Twitter. I need to be looking up reaction. Like, I was shocked. You and I are on the same page. There are obviously a lot of people that are on a different page, like the entire NFL apparently. But I really think that this it sparks an interesting conversation. Spurs. That's what I was looking for. Thanks, Fabs. Good teamwork. Yeah. Good teamwork. I will give you a 6th round pick for helping me out there. I think it has spurred an interesting conversation that I'm seeing take place about quarterback development that is really, really true and kind of needs to be addressed. I don't know if it will be addressed, but like the fact that Justin Fields entered the NFL with the degree of optimism and success that he had in college and all this stuff, like you kind of have an idea when he starts what his strengths are, what his weaknesses are. And then it's clear to everybody that they totally botched his development, like outwardly, not just like at practice. They weren't working on certain things. They put him in the worst possible positions. And it was obvious to all of us who were screaming at them to use him differently for 2 straight years. Like 2022 more egregiously than 2023. But I found myself thinking the exact same thing in 2023 at the beginning of the season. And it's just shocking to me that can happen to somebody where they don't take advantage of his strengths. They clearly haven't worked enough on making his weaknesses to help him improve. And that's just like, and scene, we're done. Like, it's so weird that at no point, and by the way, the comps for other people that they don't tap out on, the trade comp that some other quarterbacks are getting, is just bizarre to me. And it's also the fact that and I'm a Sam Darnold apologist, but I think to a degree the two kind of fall into similar. Yeah. And I should take away the word apologist. I take that away because that acknowledges that like there's something wrong and I'm apologizing for it. I'm just
there is. He's not a good football player in the NFL. That's all. Sorry.
But like that style of quarterback, they'll be like, oh, he was in a bad situation and give him a 1-year, $10 million deal, right? Like now you've got Justin Fields, who is a different style of quarterback. And I think that just a lot of people in the NFL don't know how to do it. Or what to do with that. They don't know how to bring along the parts of his game that aren't as good yet. And okay, so and one more thought on this. I have talked to quarterback coaches in the past. I'll just name because he actually said this on my podcast. Jordan Palmer, who is one of the best quarterback coaches privately, works with a ton of different quarterbacks in the NFL. Josh Allen, just a bunch of them, right? And Sam Darnold. And he has said that the NFL's like behind in terms of just development and tracking and a lot of stuff that baseball does and golf does, where they're like really getting into the nuts and bolts of like the monitoring like arm angles, and they're like really, really good at just dialing it like down to like the most specific details about a player's development. Quarterbacks get none of that. The NFL is way behind in those departments. And he also said that it's not true for all teams, but it's true for way too many of them that they want nothing to do with the private quarterback coaches. Like they're not talking to them. So these guys are all leaving for the offseason and they're working for the entire offseason or a good majority of it with a guy whose job it is to help them develop and get better. And that person isn't having access to the actual team, which makes no sense to me. If I'm a team, I could totally understand like, well, I didn't hire that Jackie. And so just because you are paying him money doesn't mean that I need to get, But if he has access to your guy that you have invested in, then you should be communicating with him. Here's what we would like him to work on. Here's the way we think that we're going to use him, and I'm going to need him to get better at this, this, and that. So you're not just working to work. Like, the right hand and the left hand have to be talking. And it's just crazy to me, and it feels very outdated that you're not trying to take advantage of all of the resources that you have. Now, some teams do that, right? And it probably has to do with some quarterback coaches are maybe easier to work with or communicate with or whatever. But I just feel like there's so many things that could be better in the NFL when it comes to developing players. And I understand the finances of it all, but Justin Fields just feels like a really like highlighted example of something that the NFL has blown. And, you know, he's not perfect 100%, but I think the NFL has blown it with him as opposed to
the fact that you've got some of the quarterbacks who played prominently last year and Justin Fields is going to be a backup going into this upcoming season just makes no sense to me whatsoever. I think there are several backups across the National Football League who are better than some of the starters. I mean, Jake Browning is a guy I would love to have seen gotten a job as a potential starter somewhere across the league, and maybe that'll happen in 2025 when he hits free agency. Time will tell. But that move kind of hurt the depth at quarterback, even though it's still deep, because now like Russell is going to end up being the starter to open the season. And if he plays well, Justin Fields will not see the light of day. And if Russell struggles or he gets hurt, you know, of course we don't want anybody to get hurt, then Fields will get his opportunity. And I mean, the Steelers obviously are kind of hoping that Russell is the guy, because then if Fields doesn't play 51% of the snaps, they only lose a 6 and not a 4, which to me is still bananas. So Michael Lombardi, a buddy of mine, of course, who you guys know, was GM in the National Football League. Like, I remember having a conversation with him talking about how like the Bears would be lucky to get a 5. Well, damn, I could again, and I must have a blind spot for Justin Fields, and maybe it's because I'm a fantasy dork, because he's a really good fantasy quarterback, but you know, there was just some stink on him one way or another, and it didn't happen for the Bears. But the bottom line here is that from a fantasy standpoint, you lose out on a quarterback who's got top 5 to top 8 potential. And now he's probably not going to get drafted until the last round, and maybe not at all, because Russell Wilson is the starter. And there are so many other good quarterbacks in the league. You know, you're going to get into Caleb Williams, who, oh, by the way, I mean, you got to be kidding me. Has there ever been a quarterback coming into the National Football League? Because typically, Linz, crappy teams get the first pick, right? Typically, it's a crap team, which means they have crappy offense, they've got a crappy defense, whatever it is. Caleb Williams will come into the league with Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, and DeAndre Swift and Roshan Johnson in his backfield, and Khalil Herbert. Holy crap. Like, that's awesome for Caleb Williams. So Caleb Williams will get drafted way before, you know, Fields or Russell Wilson. I could see a scenario where Jaden Daniels gets drafted before both of those guys. And I think the scenario is probably 99.9% of the drafts. I could see a scenario where Drake London or Drake May, gets drafted before those guys. That could potentially happen. Hell, even JJ McCarthy. If the Vikings trade up and get McCarthy and he becomes a starter, sorry, Sam Darnold, apologizer. He could end up getting drafted before Russell and certainly Justin Fields. And so that's where it hurts the value, the depth of quarterback a little bit, because
I agree,
because Justin Fields is gone for now. And Russell Wilson is now a lesser attractive QB2, because if he craps the bed, then he's going to lose his job.
I totally agree. All of that said, RG3 thinks that Caleb Williams should.
RG3 is just saying stuff to say stuff. So people, why would you not want to go to the Bears? Why would you not want to go to the Bears? Why?
I agree with his point that they blew it with Justin Fields, and that this is a like shining example of like, hey, we ruined this guy, come here. But the thing is, and now we're having a conversation about something that isn't happening here, so you guys might not. But he had a point. He was upset with the Bears. He was saying that Caleb should use his power and his leverage the way that Eli Manning did when he forced a trade from the Chargers, which was a franchise he didn't believe in. Where RG3 totally lost me, in addition to the fact that he was clearly like very animated in a way that he isn't normally. And I was like, this might be for clicks. But also he said toward the end of it, I was totally on board. And I thought Ryan Poles was crushing this offseason. until he traded Justin Fields for a second. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, that has nothing to do with Caleb. They got rid of Justin to make things more comfortable for Caleb. Like, all of this is for Caleb.
And it sounds like they might have done Justin Fields a solid, because the reports out there, Linz, are that like there's like 4 other teams that had made offers. Now, no, I'm not saying they made a second or third round offer or even a fourth, something like that. But they kind of let Justin Fields kind of pick, all right, hey, Justin, here's the teams that are interested. Where would you like to go within reason? And then, I'm sure they didn't get an offer that was better than a fourth, which again still blows my fantasy football mind. But again, I'm dug in the stats.
And Fabs, if he plays 51% of the snaps, which is how it becomes a fourth, like, think about it from that perspective. You just got a quarterback who played 51% of the snaps, and you only had to give up a fourth for him, right? Yeah. Like, the sixth is like something that you get for somebody. I mean, for crying out loud, we had Trey Lance. And they were like, yeah, what did Trey Lance, what did the Cowboys give up for Trey Lance?
Fourth.
They gave up a fourth for a guy they knew was going to sit on their bench, just in case. Maybe he'll be good. Like, and Justin Fields is a sixth again. None of it makes sense to me.
The Cowboys are a stupid team, number one. So I'm not going to go down that road. I could have some fun with the Cowboys right now and just absolutely just triumph the insult dog all over them. For those of you who get the reference, no.
Of course I get the reference.
That's the reference. I will poop on the Cowboys. But anyways, no. I mean, you're absolutely right. And what happens if, like, Justin Fields becomes the quarterback? Obviously they're going to have to give him some dough because his rookie deal is going to be coming up. But like, if he becomes their next quarterback for the next 6 to 8 years, and they gave up bupkis for him. So good on the Steelers. I know, like, Dave Damashek, our pal, will say, well, we got 2 quarterbacks no other teams wanted. The Broncos are paying $30-something gazillion to keep Russell off your team. Okay, well, that's fine. But with Fields, I still, again, man, I just feel like this kid did not get a fair shake. If he had stayed in Chicago, this would have been what, Lindsay, his 3rd offensive coordinator in 4 years. Like, it just, he didn't have any stability there. And the Bears were the Bears. I mean, they didn't have this talent. Imagine if Fields were the quarterback of this team right now, and the Bears didn't have the 1st pick. Maybe they had the 10th pick, and they weren't going to get a quarterback. Holy crap!
All right.
Like, Fields would be in our top 8 quarterbacks, right? Because he can run with the football, and all of a sudden you got Keenan Allen, and you got DJ Moore, and you got Swift. I mean, geez Louise. I mean,
all the things he didn't have,
right?
Never had.
So,
I mean,
exactly. So I mean, it's what it is. The top of the quarterback position, it lost a player, because Justin Fields would have certainly been a top 10 or 12 quarterback, and now he's not even in the top 30 because he's not going to be a starter. Unless you want to throw a dart on him, or if you take Russell and you want to handcuff him, but no one's going to do that because Russell's not a QB1. So the top of the quarterback position takes a little bit of a hit, but regardless, it's still going to be super wicked deep. And I'd be shocked if Justin Fields didn't play snaps for the Steelers. The Steelers, though, and we got this, the Steelers and the Chargers, two teams where they really need some help at wide receiver. Maybe Pittsburgh, well, we're going to run 13 all day long. Okay, but you still only got, George Pickens and not much else behind him with Calvin Austin. And in LA, and you want to talk about a player who lost a lot of value. I'm doing my rankings for next season after the free. Lindsay, I don't have Justin Herbert in my top 10. I don't have him in my top 12, and I'm struggling to keep him in my top 15.
All right. Well, let's get to that in 2 seconds, because that is a good segue to our fantasy free agency winners and losers discussion that was the intention for us to have. We're like 20 minutes into the show, and we have just ranted about Justin Fields.
Yeah, if you guys don't know from Fantasy Dirt, Lindsay and I are blabbermouths.
Blah, blah, blah.
You already know that.
We are, by the way, also, if you are a regular listener, you know that I have been begging for a mock draft, and we are going to do one on Thursday's show.
Lindsay Rhodes asks, Fabs acquiesces, and we will have, I don't know how many rounds we're going to get into, but it's going to be myself, the lovely Mrs. Rhodes, our pal Toss, and James Rodriguez, the great actor. We will be doing a mock draft on Thursday. What do we get? Maybe 3 or 4 rounds, you think? Something like that?
I don't know. I'm going to have to shut up and just kind of like get through the names and talk less. That's my
Josh,
lesson
you're
because
gonna
I
have to
do.
put together like a spreadsheet or something like that so we can
Yeah.
follow along too.
Well, my goal is that we need to keep it moving because I want to get into as many rounds because I don't think it's interesting to just do the first 2 rounds. Like, okay, duh. You know what I mean? Like, where are these other people falling? Like, where can I get a running back that I'm happy with if I
Right.
don't grab one in the first couple rounds? That's the only ways that mock drafts are even valuable to me. I think you got to
Mhm.
do more. Anyway, so I'm looking forward to that. And that's coming up on Thursday. Want to, before we get into our free agency winners and losers from a fantasy standpoint, remind you that the tournament is here. It is tournament time. Are you going to fill out a bracket? How many brackets are you going to fill out? Are you going to do it at Bet Online? It's your bracket headquarters for this season with the best bracket contest out there and odds and lines and info on every game and every round right up until the national championship. You can access the most up-to-the-minute wagering information anytime from your desktop or your mobile devices and even track your bracket real time all the way through the tournament. Head to Bet Online today and get in on all the action. Remember to use the promo code, as always, BLEAV, BLEAV, for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. This is a good time to use that because you can get in on the bracket action. Bet Online, the game starts here. Fabs, free agency winners and losers. Let's play this game. And we can merge. It could be a player that moved. It could be a player that did not move, but whose fortunes potentially changed because of the moves that were made around them. Who stands out to you as somebody that you like maybe more than you did before because of the things that happened last week?
I like Saquon Barkley much more because now he's not stuck in the hell that is the New York Giants offense. Derrick Henry, I don't know that I like him more, but I'm not
Yeah.
like if he stayed in Tennessee, I would almost be like, yeah, maybe I'll drop him out of the top 12. Now he's going to be in there because of the Baltimore situation. I think Josh Jacobs would have been great in Las Vegas. So I don't know that. I think from a fantasy standpoint, I don't know that that's like a big win.
Is it
But some
lateral?
players who are significantly going to move up because of free agency, and these are
Mhm.
just among the players who change teams. Zach Moss,
Yes.
who is probably going to be a handcuff to Jonathan Taylor at best in drafts. Now he's the RB1 in Cincinnati. So that's huge. And then Gus Edwards.
Wait. Where
Yeah.
does he go? Where do you have him? What
I
kind of
haven't
range?
done
What
my
are the names
rankings
around
yet,
him?
but my guess is that Moss will be in that RB2 flex range. I haven't
Yeah.
done. I got to work on those this week. They'll be over at Sports Illustrated, which by the way is still alive, folks. So what do they
Yeah,
say?
good news.
Yeah, what do they say about the stories of its demise were greatly exaggerated. Anyways, more on that in the future. But Zach Moss is probably in that RB2 flex mix,
Because Fabs,
and
that's a guy who was a startable asset
he
last
was
year when he
awesome
was
in the first
starting
five
for the
weeks.
Colts.
He was awesome. Yeah, maybe I'm being too conservative, but
Maybe.
I mean,
Th-
I'll give you an
that's fair.
example. I'll give you an example. Tony Pollard, who I don't love going to Tennessee, or Zach Moss. See, it's not easy. Not easy.
Yeah.
Not easy doing fantasy football rankings. So, anyways, Zach Moss moves up, and Gus Edwards. Now, I think the Chargers got to add somebody else.
Yeah.
Like I'm guessing maybe through the draft because
Yes.
Eckler's gone, obviously to Washington. Isaiah Spiller's on a contract, but Joshua Kelly's a free agent, so they got to add somebody. But remember San Francisco. Now I feel like Sophia Petrillo from the Golden Girls. Picture it, San Francisco.
You have to say it with an accent, but yeah.
I can't. Mid 2000s.
By the way,
Right
like
under
you
Jim
have
Harbaugh. Like Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman love bruising backs. Love them. Right? That's a big reason why Eckler ain't there no more. And Gus Edwards is a bruiser.
Mhm.
In San Francisco, they have Frank Gore. Now, Frank Gore didn't have like massive seasons, but he was a good RB2. They like bruising backs. Now, I think the Chargers are going to add somebody, like I said, probably through draft.
Yeah.
We'll see. But the bottom line of that right now, Linz, Gus Edwards had 13 rushing touchdowns last year in Baltimore. And if the Chargers don't do something significant in their backfield, which again, I think they will, but if they don't, Gus Edwards, I mean, you could be starting him as a flex every week.
By the way, since we're talking about the Chargers and some of the moves, I have seen people talking about Josh Palmer, Quentin Johnston, like what the movement of Mike Williams and Keenan Allen move for them, and like arrow up. I think it's TBD. just hold your horses. We're not done yet. This is a undecided what their role is even on this team, because that is a bad wide receiver room as it stands right now. They're going to add more. This is not everybody. I posted after they dealt Keenan, gee, I wonder what they're going to do at 5 now. And people were like, Blake Corum, didn't get, they're like, I still think it's not going to be a wide receiver because Jim Harbaugh doesn't value them. Like, you can't, even if that's true, you can't in the year 2024 in the National Football League go into a season and be like, we don't care about wide receivers. Like, we don't
I
need any
know.
good ones.
You're right.
What? Like, of course you do.
You're right on both ends. In San Francisco, they had Anquan Bolden and Michael Crabtree. Neither one of those guys were elite fantasy receivers when they played under Harbaugh and Roman. They were good. They were like wide receiver 2 types, but they didn't have a lot. I mean, you're looking at like guys behind them was like Mario Manningham, for crying out loud. So let me give you a scenario.
Mm-hmm.
On those rosters was also a guy named Vernon Davis, who was pretty good in fantasy. In some of those years, he was an elite type of guy.
Right.
Did the Chargers draft Brock Bowers and forget about wide receiver until later in the draft?
They just signed
Quentin Johnston, Joshua Palmer, as their top
whoever.
2.
No.
Okay.
Because Joshua Palmer and Quentin Johnston are not a top 2. They're not a 1 and a 2. They're not even a 2 and a 3 in my estimation. Like, I'm not sure based on what we saw last year. And Quentin Johnston, we talked about development. He still gets more time. We're going to develop him. I'm not sure that that's even somebody who needs to be on the field in an ideal situation. Maybe rotating it. I don't know. But I'm not excited about those 2 as you need to add a 1. In that room, and maybe even a 1 and a 2, to be super honest with you. Like, that's not a room I like at all right now. So there is work to be done. I see what you're saying about the tight end. They've added on purpose 2 tight ends in free agency. Are you going to go in with like 3? If their plan was to draft Bowers at 5, then I think they would have signed 1 free agent tight end. They would have signed 1 like Disley, like the blocking back, right? And then go get your receiving back there. I don't think that you're purposefully trying to like load up at that position prior to the draft if you're going to use your most valuable draft resource on somebody who can play that position in every down, which is what they say about Bowers.
Would you consider signing Hayden Hurst and Will Disley as loading up at tight end? Like, this guy you know what I mean? Like Bowers is like, could be Antonio Gates for the next, 10 years.
Exactly. Yes.
In that offense.
So how many backups do you need at tight end?
I'm just throwing it out there.
Like, I mean, I guess to a degree, you have got the Chiefs who have a bunch of tight ends, and they have the highest end right tight end in Travis Kelce. So there's an argument to be made for just having a bunch of tight ends. But I think you could do that by signing like lower end tight ends who can just do certain things. You're not going out and paying people on purpose in the first wave of free agency. That doesn't scream to me. Our plan is to draft somebody to play this position, and
I think
it might be that is, but
I think
that they have to. I think all of these moves. Yes,
I'm just throwing it out there because weird crap happens in the NFL all the time, right? I mean,
I just would be surprised because you have to have wide receivers. Like, you have to. You have to. And the names that you mentioned there, Anquan Bolden was great in Arizona, right? Like, Anquan Bolden was somebody who was a very good wide receiver. And then he didn't have great fantasy numbers in the offense. I understand that they're not necessarily going to be throwing it all over the yard, and these wide receivers aren't going to be like the number 1 guy that we want to draft in fantasy because of the offense. But that doesn't mean you don't need to have valuable wide receivers on the field. You could just go like, no big deal. Like, they're going to draft a wide receiver. That has to happen, or figure out some other way to get a different guy in there. But those were financially driven moves with Keenan and Mike Williams. Those were not because they didn't care about having good ones there. Like, they needed to shed the salary for a bunch of different reasons, and Keenan wasn't willing to take a pay cut, and understandably. And so, but they're going to get a number 1. And so just hold your horses on like doing the analysis. And that doesn't just go for Josh Palmer and Quentin Johnston. Like, we don't have to analyze every single player at this point, right? Like, some of these offenses are clearly in limbo. Like, we are in transition. There are moves that are yet to be made. We could talk about it, but like, some of it's a moot point. I think the Chargers wide receiver room right now is a totally moot point. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say about that. So we were talking about some of the other people that you like. Can I jump in? I totally agree with Zach Moss. With one of the later moves that was made, and that was Hollywood Brown to Kansas City. I very much like this for Hollywood Brown. How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, no brainer, right? I mean, Mahomes hasn't had an elite type wide receiver. Not that Hollywood's going to be Tyreek Hill,
Totally.
but I mean, Hollywood Brown, when he's been out there, he's had some some injury issues and maybe some quarterback issues, right, in Arizona. But he's a hell of a player, and he's in the prime of his career. He's going to be able to stretch defenses. I think he's going to hurt Rashee Rice a little bit, especially if the Chiefs draft a wide receiver at the end of round one, which a lot of mock drafts have them doing, which would bolster that wide receiver core and maybe make me think a little bit better of Patrick Mahomes in fantasy next season. I think I still have him ranked third among quarterbacks right now, but it is what it is. So now I think, hell, you're going to Mahomes. That's great. And Kelsey's going to be there, but Kelsey's 34, 35 years old. So coming off a less than stellar season based off of his high standards. So that's a win. That's a win too. I mean, go ahead.
His catchable ball rate, Hollywood Brown last year, with a quarterback room that was like constantly rotating, right? So that's part of it. But his catchable, when you think about what his fantasy value was last year, keep this in mind. His catchable ball rate was ranked, it was 68.4%. That ranked 76th out of 81 qualifying receivers. The way I did it was you had to have at least 50 targets to qualify for this. 81 receivers did. He ranked 76th with his catchable ball rate. Like, that means that the ball, like, that's not his fault, right? That's only 68% of the balls that were thrown his way were deemed catchable. Rashee Rice had the highest catchable ball rate in the entire NFL, 87.3%. That is the disparity that you're going to make up for Hollywood Brown goes into an offense where Patrick Mahomes will get you the ball and let you make plays. Like, we're going to see his fantasy value go up just because of that, right? Like, I mean, to a degree, I'm not saying like he goes to the top or anything like that, because he's going to have competition for targets, certainly. But the targets that he gets are going to be good targets. And so we'll get a chance to see what he can do with that.
Mahomes,
but I like him.
Yeah. Mahomes on target rate last year, 77%. That's in the top 10. He was third in on target passes overall with 474. His bad percentage throws, I mean, he's 18th. So there's no question, that this is a big upgrade. And I could see Hollywood Brown, being a pretty nice flex starter. I still have Rashee Rice ranked higher. But there's a gap that closed big time between those two players when Hollywood signed with the Chiefs. So we'll stick with a couple of wide receivers who I feel their value is also on the rise, but they didn't move. Mm-hmm. First off, Christian Kirk, because Calvin Ridley's in Tennessee now, 136 targets up for grabs. Gabe Davis, I don't care. Gabe Davis has never had 100 targets in a season in his career. The most he's had is 93. I don't think that's going to change. It's Christian Kirk to the moon in Jacksonville from a fantasy perspective. And then, of course, Lindsay's beloved Drake London in Atlanta with Kirk Cousins now throwing him the football. That is a massive, massive upgrade from hitting him with the Heineke and Desmond Ridder to Kirk. And so this will be the breakout year for Drake London if it's ever going to happen.
Yeah, that was the number one name that I had written down on my list as the biggest winner. Cousins had the second highest catchable ball rate in the league last year, and obviously didn't play the whole year for a regular starter. 81.4% of his throws were deemed catchable. That's incredible. You know who number one was, by the way? You'd be interested in this?
For catchable
ball rate, quarterback.
Is it Dak?
It's Dak.
Yeah, baby. Come on now.
Yeah. So Cousins number two.
Didn't win a playoff game, but whatever. It's fine. It's all good.
Ritter's was actually much better than you would probably expect at 75.5%. It was better than a lot of other starters, including Jalen Hurts and Stafford and Baker and Kyler, which was shocking to me. But Drake London's catchable ball rate, so the ones that went specifically to him, he was middle of the pack. He was 44th out of 81. Again, Rashee Rice, was so I'm sorry, that's unrelated. But for comparison purposes, Rushy Rice was 87, right? So that's like the number one. That's what you're looking at. That's about a 10% drop off. Kyle Pitts, interestingly, last for a tight end with at least 50 targets, ranked
That should
24th,
change.
24th.
Let's hope. Fingers
Yeah,
and toes crossed for Kyle Pitts this
but
upcoming
but
season.
But we're more excited about this for Drake London, right? And do you think
Yes.
that's because we just feel a little bit more confident that Drake London will be able to take advantage and Kyle Pitts just feels like a huge wild card? Like, I think that this is good
Well,
for Drake
I
London. I
think
mean, for Kyle Pitts too. I'm
yeah,
just
no, it
less
is.
emphatic about that.
It
And there's
definitely is.
less room for him to move. Like, he was already where he is, even though we like it more for Kyle Pitts. He's not going to jump the guys ahead of him, I don't think.
Drake's got a shot to be a pretty solid wide receiver too next season. I think I don't know that he can be top 12, but stranger things have happened. And now he's in a position where we can talk about him as potentially being a low one and certainly a wide receiver too. If Drake
Yep.
London isn't at worst a low two, he's had a bad year, or Kirk
I
Cousins got hurt, whatever the case may be. In that offense, which we would expect them to throw the football, we would expect that to be an exciting offense. Although we don't know much about Zach Robinson because he's never been an OC before. You know, he comes from a pretty productive tree. Let's put it that way, right? And I think that offense is going to be a lot of fun to watch with Bijan and Kyle Pitts. And they also traded for Rondell Moore, who's now in the mix as well. So should be a fun offense to watch. But Drake London's a big winner.
Drake for me last year, because I had him on a couple of teams, was a guy that I rotated in and out of my flex. Like sometimes played him in the flex, other times had
Right
somebody else that I
now,
wanted to play.
should
Now
be
I
in your
think he's
lineup.
more
Yeah,
like that wide receiver too, that you're more often than not just going to lock him into your lineup.
right.
So I think it's
Yep.
a huge, huge gain for him.
Yep.
Who else?
So Zamir White didn't change teams, but he's a winner. And I know Alexander Madison signed, and I didn't love that
Uh-huh.
for
Uh-uh.
Zamir White, but I
Uh-uh.
still feel like Zamir White's going to be the starter, and he
I
will
agree.
still be 1A, right? I don't even know that Alexander Madison is 1B. I think Alexander Madison is 2. So
Mhm.
Madison, like, I get it. You know, we kind of loved him in behind Dalvin Cook, and Dalvin Cook's out. Don't worry, Alexander Madison to the rescue. And then when Alexander Madison had a shot to be something last year, he really wasn't. He was wicked inconsistent, and he didn't get the job done. Zamir White, it's crazy. In the last 4 weeks of the season, he averaged 23 touches and 15 points per game. So he showed that, like, yeah, man, I know Josh Jacobs is good, but I can do a few things out there on the football field. Give me a shot. And you remember Zamir White was like a popular guy in the preseason a few years ago. Remember, like Hall
Yeah.
of Fame game? Oh, here we go. And then, but like now he's got a legitimate shot. Unless the Raiders add a running back in the draft, he has a legitimate shot to be the guy. And so he's definitely a winner out of the players that did not change teams. I think you got to say the same for George Pickens. Now the Steelers should probably do something at wide receiver in the draft, and typically they've had success in the draft at wide receiver. Let's see if they pull another rabbit out of their hat. But Pickens is a winner. I know you don't like Quentin Johnson, and to be quite honest with you, Lindsay, I don't love him either.
No.
But he's still a winner.
Nah.
The top two guys are going ahead of him. So now, now I don't know where I'm going to rank Quentin Johnson. I don't know that I'll have him ranked more than like a low 3. I don't believe in the guy. He drops too many passes, and in a bad rookie year, which I mean, it's you forgive that. It's only 1 year. I just was not a big Quentin Johnson guy coming out of college, and I don't think in this offense, especially if they get another guy, that there's going to be enough for Quentin Johnson to really be a consistent fantasy producer. But for right now, his value went up. His absolutely value went up, and we'll see what the Chargers do in the draft.
Yeah, I I know on paper his value went up because he is one of just a handful of wide receivers
All the
left in that
targets
room.
are there now.
But to me, I'm okay to leave him undrafted. Like he won't be on a single one of my teams unless something dramatic happens between now and then in terms of the news coming out of camp. Like even if the room stays exactly as it is, which is not gonna, I still don't want what I've seen. There are other directions for me to go. I'm happy to leave him on the waiver wire and pick him up if it starts clicking. I don't need that. Who was the person you said right before that?
Before Quentin Johnson?
Yeah.
George Pickens.
Okay. That's another one where I think that wide receiver room is also in flux. It's
Yes.
incomplete.
Mhm.
Yeah, so
Agreed.
certainly you would look at this now and say, like, this is good for George Pickens. He steps into the role of a 1. I would be surprised if that stands,
Okay.
in week 1.
A couple of other players, Michael Wilson in Arizona. Now we assume Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be drafted there, but Daniel Jeremiah, our pal, who I've been trying to get on this damn podcast, hopefully soon. He's a
He's
busy
busy.
man.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's a busy man. He did a mock draft, which came out, I believe, yesterday or
Yeah.
today, where he had the Jets trading up and with the Cardinals so they could get Marvin Harrison. And then the Cardinals ended up getting Brian Thomas out of LSU later on in the draft. I don't know if that's going to happen. Normally, Jeremiah's not like a chaos guy, but he kind of threw some chaos into this thing. But even if Marvin Harrison Jr. gets drafted by the Cardinals, I think it's still a good thing for Michael Wilson because that kid's going to draw a lot of coverage. And Michael Wilson is a talented player who showed some upside as a rookie. And right now, he's their 1. Now, I think that's going to change, obviously.
Yeah.
But his value goes up. And now, we don't have a drum roll, right? Because we don't have the budget for it. But Marvin Mims, Rhodes, he's the 2 right now for the Broncos.
Wait,
He's
I
the
missed
2.
I was so excited about my drums that I missed
Marvin
the
Mims. I mean, like right now, it's early fun. It's
Woo!
Marvin Mims and Tim Patrick. And then maybe Brock Bowers if they decide to draft Bowers. I believe they're at 12. But Marvin Mims is a guy that Sean Payton drafted. And so he
Tapping.
obviously likes him. And then with Jerry Jeudy shipped to Cleveland, what is more? And I know you love Marvin
he doesn't
Mims.
have a quarterback. He doesn't have a quarterback.
True.
Who knows who's throwing him the
True.
ball? This is problematic
Fit him, I know,
potentially,
right.
but we like Mims.
What do
We
you
like
think
Mims.
his upside is? What do you think his upside, Marvin Mims? Let's say that the Broncos, I mean, they'd have to trade up to get a quarterback like a McCarthy, but say McCarthy's the quarterback. Or maybe it's Stidham. Maybe they just ride Stidham for a year. Like, what's Mims' upside?
Who knows? Because the advanced stats suggest that he's very good, but they didn't use him last year. So who knows if that's just a very small sample size or they put him exactly in the right, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It could be that he, with more playing time, turns into one of the best wide receivers in the NFL. It could be that he is a flex for us. Like, I just think that there's so many unknowns. In terms of drafts, he's certainly going to be a guy that's going later, I think. Like, he's going to be like a late round pick at wide receiver because people just haven't seen them use him that much. Even though he has a better role, I don't think that people are going to be like, this doesn't jump a bunch of people that we're familiar with. There's so much uncertainty, especially, like I said, with the quarterback. Like, we need to lock that up. Are we talking about like a bridge, that's going to be throwing him the ball? Well, then that impacts my excitement level. I really like him, but like, are we talking about a good quarterback or not a good quarterback? This is very in flux. But I think from a ceiling standpoint, who freaking knows? Because we just never saw him. And every time Sean Payton got a chance to talk about him, he was like, we have to use him more. I know he's so good. And then he just never did. So this feels like a move that it at least acknowledges that they do think that he is good and they would like him to get more opportunities, and they just didn't have space for it last year.
You mentioned not knowing about a quarterback and whether or not they would be good or not. Yeah. That's another perfect description of the next player on my list, Will Levis. Will Levis could end up being a fantasy star. I'm not talking about Mahomes level. But I'm talking about a guy who you could start every week based on the matchups. He has got sick talent around him. He's got a great receiver in Calvin Ridley. He's got Nuke Hopkins. So I know Nuke Hopkins is going into his age 32 year, but he's still a good player. You've got Chig, you've got Pollard, you've got Spears. You got a good, the offensive line should be better. Will Levis is going to be like sort of under the radar, one of the most important players in fantasy football next season. Why? Because his development and whether or not he succeeds or fails will ultimately also determine whether or not Nuke Hopkins succeeds or fails, or Calvin Ridley succeeds or fails, or Tony Pollard succeeds or fails. Because if the quarterback is not getting the job done, well, it's going to be hard for those guys to be consistently good from a fantasy perspective, especially in an offense now, Lindsay, that has a lot of mouths to feed. Does it fit?
That's exciting
to
even say
and
that
I didn't
about
even mention
the
Treylon
Titans.
Burks. So,
well, you don't need to. I mean, I hope it's better. I hope it's better, right? Like, I'm optimistic, but not in fantasy.
Right.
Yeah,
So,
that's definitely not a move we're
but
trying to
Will
make in
Levis is all
fantasy.
of a sudden you're like looking at the talent around him, Lindsay. You're like, damn, late round pick. I'll take him.
My computer could not be more slow right now. So I'm having trouble finding this. But
Let me see it. Wait,
pressure
let me see it. Let me see if I can read your mind.
dude,
Last year, Will Levis's on target throws
no, no,
among
no.
32 quarterbacks was dead last. That stinks. It's
Wait, was
terrible.
it? Was it?
He was 33rd in on target throws, and he was ninth in percentage of bad throws. I'm trying I'm trying to like get my inner Lindsay Rhodes in here and guess what she might say. Will Levis, outside of that one game, his first start where he had like 15 touchdowns and they all went to Nuke Hopkins, was not a good quarterback.
Why am I not that must have been it, to be honest with you, because I thought it was this is why I was looking it up and not well. I thought it was pressure to sack ratio that was really, really high. So I just pulled up that stat. Hold, please. Sorry. Um,
Yes, 28.1%. He was
how? How
pressured.
did you do that fast? Like I've literally been looking
I
for it
got
the
lightning
entire
fast.
time you were
I got lightning
talking.
fast internet. It just like it's crazy good. Xfinity. Thank you. I should get some
Hmm.
kind of advertising dough from them now. Give me a little cash. Yeah, mine's Florida, baby. Come on, move to Florida, Linz. Move to Florida. It's
Not
cheaper
gonna happen.
here. We got faster internet. We don't have earthquakes. Maybe you have to deal with
Okay.
a hurricane, but at least your internet speed will be good. And you guys come and hang out by the pool. You and
Yeah.
Matt, and the kids. Uh, again, Lindsay Rhodes is never moving to Florida. That I know for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely not happening. Okay. Yeah. It's but yeah, you're right about Will Levis. I don't I mean he's definitely somebody that from a fantasy standpoint you're not taking until very, very
No,
late
no, no,
in the
no,
draft,
no.
right? Like
This is like late round, like dark toss because of the situation. Brian
flyer.
Callahan has
Mhm.
had. You listen. I mean, Brian Callahan, was obviously with the Bengals and that offense and Joe Burrow, and he's a guy. He's had T Higgins and Jamar Chase on the same. Now you got Ridley and you got Nuke. I mean, not guys that are both in their prime. Nuke's past it and Ridley's probably right in the midst of it, but still, Callahan's offenses have. I mean, hell, listen, Jake Browning was good last year. Like, I mean, I'm not saying he was as good as Joe Burrow would have been, but he wasn't bad. And he didn't have Higgins for a part of the year, and Jamar was all jacked up. So, like, Callahan comes in. This offense is going to be so weird, right? Because, like, you're so used to watching, all right, Titans, hut,
It's going to be very
Omaha,
different.
here we
Right.
go, whatever it is. And then you just hand the ball off to Derrick Henry. Now, they're going to run it, but still, this is going to be a team that throws the football.
You
And it's
know
going to be a
what?
lot of fun to watch. But
Another coach
Levis has got to
another
be the guy.
sorry. Another coaching change that I think is going to be good for all of the pieces that are there is Canales in Carolina, and I have Deontay Johnson's name written down as like with the question marks after it. Like I think that this could actually be a winner situation for him because, and I know on the surface it looks like he goes to Carolina and Bryce Young was not good last year. I think that there's a chance that he actually has a better fantasy season in Carolina than he did in Pittsburgh. I mean, at the very least, it's like a swap at like a 1-for-1 at quarterback, right? Like, because he had bad quarterback play last year. So we already know what that looks like. That's our starting point. I think there's no guarantee that the quarterback play will be better this year, but I do think that there's a chance that it will be, and also I think that the coaching will be much better. I have a lot more faith that Canales is going to put them in position to succeed, and that he has a history of working with quarterbacks and saying like, what is your weakness so far? Let's work around that. Let's disguise that. Let's put you in positions to succeed. We've seen him do that in other places. So I think that he will be good for Bryce Young in that way, and that will be good for Deontay Johnson. He had a catchable target rate of 70% last year. Not good. Not good. That's like near the bottom of the wide receivers in the league. He obviously had bad quarterback play. He had a high school offense that he was working in. So I think that one's kind of like a sneaky, interesting
Kenny
one for
Pickett,
me.
Kenny Pickett, third worst in On target throws.
Yep. That's the stat of the day, by the way. You know how Sesame Street has like a
Crappy.
letter and a number? You and I are like highly into the catchable ball rate today.
Yeah,
That
well, I
stat's
mean,
never come up so
it's
much.
important. Let's hope that let's hope that Jalen Hurts does not get hurt in Philadelphia, because then all of our AJ Brown and Devontae Smith assets are going to go to HE double hockey sticks.
Do you think it's interesting that Kenny Pickett like wants to be there in Philadelphia?
I mean, I'd rather be, if I'm Kenny Pickett, knowing I'm not going to start,
Mm-hmm.
because they had said Russell was going to start before they even acquired Fields, right? I'd rather go to a team that maybe has a shot to win a championship because I'm young, and then at some point try and get with a team where I can get an opportunity to potentially earn a starting job. I don't, but I
But I
don't
mean,
know. I don't
he
know where else he could have went.
clearly has that opportunity in Pittsburgh.
What?
Like,
What to win a championship? No, no,
no, no,
no.
no, no to start. Like, if he had just like hit pause, Russell comes in, Russell's the starter. I understand he's totally angry about the way that it's the communication and the way that it's handled and stuff like that. But like Russell, based on what we've seen in the last few years, is somebody who could be supplanted this year. Like you could pull him off the football field, and have somebody else, give somebody else a chance. It's entirely possible and in the range of outcomes that this is not going to work with Russ in Pittsburgh. So taking the emotion of it out and looking at that situation, I would think you would be like, I have a better chance to start in Pittsburgh behind Russell than I do going to Philadelphia behind Jalen Hurts. And I think it's interesting that he is excited about being in Philadelphia in that way. And I'm wondering if, like, Jalen Hurts
Well,
wasn't great
I'm
towards
gonna.
the end of the year. Like, you would, on paper, you'd look at it and go, like, Jalen's not coming off the field.
All right. Well, here's the thing. Because we've continued with our Sesame Street theme.
Okay.
Last year, Russell Wilson 78% on target throws, right with Jalen Hurts, right there with Jalen Hurts. His percentage of bad throws, he was fourth from the bottom. So he didn't have a lot of bad throws last year. We could just put that there. So based on our stats, that Lindsay and I like to throw out there, he also was pressured seventh most in the NFL among quarterbacks last year. Just saying.
Wow. Oh, Michael Fabiano. There's so much room for improvement for an awful lot of people. All right, Fabs, you've said this 800 times. We yap. And this is not making me feel optimistic that we're an hour into the show and we haven't talked about a single loser for our mock draft purposes on Thursday. I swear to God, I'm going to tighten up my thoughts. Anyway, because we did not right now, what we're going to do is we're going to move the free agency losers to a different episode. It will be there right now. Where you're listening, just click to the next episode and it'll be up. But we will tell you about the people we do not believe in. Thanks for listening to the Believe Fantasy Football Show presented by Bet Online. Follow Michael Fabiano at Michael_Fabiano and Lindsay_Rhodes. And we'll have your fantasy losers in just a sec.